Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So, last night was the most important election night that we had since November, and there were several House elections that were up for grabs in the state of Florida. Republicans won both of them. And then in the state of Wisconsin, you had an all-important Supreme Court race that would dictate the makeup of the Supreme Court in the state of Wisconsin, which could have, potential consequences for 2026, 2028, redistricting in the state, you name it, election laws. And that did not exactly go in the Republicans' favor, even though a voter ID amendment was on the ballot and did pass overwhelmingly, being the silver lining. So I thought in this video we would analyze the election results from last night, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So in terms of the good, we could start off with Florida, because Republicans, they won both of these elections, despite the fact that Democrats, they poured a lot of money in. And this was definitely an election where it should not have been competitive. The Democrats did their best to take advantage of the special election environment by making it competitive. And by the way, Randy Fine is not a very strong candidate. He still outperformed expectations. He won by 14 points. He had a big showing on Election Day. But you have a guy who is kind of a rhino. He's weak on immigration. And on top of it, he just generally is not viewed as a very pleasant person in the state of Florida based on how he conducts himself, how he communicates. People see him as a blowhard, a liability, you name it. But still, he ended up winning. There was a big push from Trump to turn out voters towards the end of the election cycle, and he won by 14. So he outran our prediction where I said it would be closer. He'd win by 11, but he won by 14. That's still a big underperformance. Part of it is the special election environment. That is true. But still, Fine is a liability, and it is very, very possible that he could get primaried out come 2026 because he's really not that popular. He did not really have the best showing. Josh Wheel was not even that strong of a candidate either on the Democrat side. He had problems of his own, but still, of the voters who actually showed up, he ended up getting some crossover support, which is more of an indictment on Randy Fine than it is on anybody else. It should not have been this close, but it was. But regardless, a win is a win, and that is true. And Republicans will have their 220 House majority still in terms of the amount of seats that they have. So that is good that they won, but the underperformance a little bit shaky, but not as shaky as this underperformance because Jimmy Patronis, despite being in a much redder district, this is the Florida Panhandle, this is Matt Gaetz's old seat, you name it, he only won against a very liberal candidate by 14.6 percentage points. So he barely outran Randy Fine, despite being in a much redder seat. And again, I think this one is turnout, and Patronis is kind of somebody that's a little controversial based on the whole, insurance crisis that people talk about in Florida. A lot of people have blamed Patronis for that. That partially could be why the results were closer. But again, it's very low turnout. People want to use this as an example of, Republicans are really going to struggle in 2026. It's like if you look at the candidate on the Democrat side, Gay Valament, that same candidate ran against Matt Gaetz, and in 2020 got double the total raw votes that she got last night. So this is a turnout issue in the state of Florida in terms of the fact that you have an opportunity for a much redder environment based on the amount of voters, and you didn't get it. And the Republicans that did turn out, well, Patronis didn't do as well with them as he probably should have done. And that was something that really ended up hurting his end margin. But once again, a win is a win. But Republicans in Florida, you look at the Democrat candidate, they did outspend the Republican like 4-1 because Fine is weak. So a lot of the resources had to go into this district, and that possibly played a role. But regardless, they did what they had to do to win. And there needs to be some regrouping ahead of 2026 in terms of, are we going to possibly primary Fine for somebody stronger? Is that possible? Is that viable? I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But the main election took place in Wisconsin, and this was embarrassing, downright embarrassing, no excuses for it. Because we talk about 2023 being a disaster. Republicans, they were running Dan Kelly. He ended up losing to Janet Prstosowicz by 11, which was an awful performance. And we know turnout this time is up around 500,000 voters. And Brad Schimmel, who, on paper you'd say is a stronger candidate. He was the attorney general. He won a statewide office. He almost held it in a blue wave in 2018. He went out there and he just showed his rear end last night. He lost by 10 in the state of Wisconsin, which Donald Trump, 6 months ago ended up winning by 1 point. So that's an 11-point shift in the opposite direction. Now, it is true you can't compare presidential elections to these type of elections. I think this is more comparable to 2023, where if you look at it, there was a 1-point improvement. So if you want to have the silver lining game, you could look at that, but it's like either way, this is still a piss poor performance. I thought it'd be a little closer than this. I think we all knew that we'd see underperformances in Florida. We all knew that Republicans would probably fall short in this because this is an election in the Rust Belt where a lot of your base is lower propensity in like the Driftless area, in just the entire state. And you're going to get a much more educated electorate, which does not bode well for Republicans compared to, 20 years ago when Republicans would win college degree holders. Now they don't, but they do much better with the working class voters, but they don't show up as much in these type of elections, and as a result, it's a problem. That's one of the problems. Obviously, there was a persuasion factor because you did see turnout go up. It wasn't like midterm level even, but it was close to that, like 80-some percent of a midterm electorate. That is true. But, a lot of the voters that were left on the table would have backed Brad Schimmel if you had, the full Trump electorate from 2024. It would have been within a couple of points. I'm not saying that Brad would have won, but it would have been much, much closer. But you look at this election, it's really dictated by setting the narrative and propensity. And you did see that cause a lot of positive effects for the Democrats and the candidate they endorsed, because technically it's nonpartisan, which arguably helped them too. But for the Republican side, there was just a lot of negative effects from that. And we'll talk about it more, but I did want to briefly touch base on voter ID passing with 63% of the vote in the same electorate, because again, it's common sense. A lot of people, unless they're very hyper-partisan liberals, they're going to support voter ID, and now it's codified in the Constitution. So the silver lining is that Crawford and the liberal court, which already was liberal, by the way, they can't mess with it. But in terms of election laws, they're going to stay the same. They're going to try to redraw the maps, most likely. They will probably draw out Derek Van Orden, who could have very well lost anyways. And on top of it, they're going to try to draw out in the 1st District, Brian Steele. I'm not sure if they're going to do it successfully or not, but either way, they're going to try to mess with the maps, and this is why it's so important and consequential that people turn out for every election. Now, I will say that in this election, it was much closer, the superintendent election, where you did have the Democrat, who was an incumbent, by the way, go out there and win, but win by a lesser margin than the top of the ticket. And I have some theories on that, and I kind of wanted to bring this up because I have several tweets kind of analyzing it, and I wanted to cover these. And it's true because there is that ticket split. And when you look at the issues that dictate the race, abortion is huge. Now, Crawford was losing the early polls. We covered this back in February until the race was made about abortion. She got all this big money. And yes, it's true, Elon came in at the end, and we'll get to that in a second because the left is cheering, oh, Elon couldn't buy the seat. Well, the seat was bought by somebody. We understand. This was a very hotly contested race on both sides. That we know. You had a lot of money from Soros and all of his associates pouring in. Elon spent a lot. But again, it was too little too late, and it wasn't very efficient, by the way, if we're going to be completely honest, and that's another thing, because you spent a lot of money, and it's true, he did, but how many people actually were able to see advertisements based on that money? Because everybody I talked to, they saw like 5 Janet ads for every Brad ad. The Brad ads weren't good. The messaging wasn't great. And the Elon stuff still energized the opposition like there was no tomorrow. There was a big turnout in election day, and that is true. But it wasn't exactly for Brad Schimmel. It was for the liberal judge. And that definitely was something a lot of people, even on the left, were not anticipating. I don't think they were expecting a result to be that lopsided at the end of the day. But arguably, Elon, despite spending money, just basically burned it. It wasn't efficient, and it was too late. So that's a big problem on that front. If he got in early, they still would have had the narrative, but the money would have helped more. So maybe next time he'll have to get in early. Maybe he'll have to do it in a more subtle manner. I don't know what the move really is, but either way, we were being outspent ridiculously. He felt like he needed to do something, and now they're trying to make it about, oh, Elon, he tried to buy it. And it's like, no, you guys were buying it. He tried to level the playing field. It was just too late. That's really all it was. But again, you look at abortion, that's something the Democrats in the Rust Belt, in these midterm years, these off-year elections, they've been able to capitalize on it. And they're not going to rule, by the way, on the issue of abortion on the Democrat side. They're not going to rule on it in the court. They're just going to dangle it over people's heads so they can run on it and win on it. It's not like they even actually care about the issue. They just want it to be like this political weapon that they're able to use. They don't want like an abortion referendum. In fact, that would be beneficial for Republicans in Wisconsin. It wouldn't go our way, and that's unfortunate. But again, Wisconsin is not a state that is a very pro-life state. I wish it was, but it's really not. But you see what's going on in Michigan. They got that out of the way. It was less of an election issue come 2024 even. Maybe that's partially why Michigan voted to the right of Wisconsin, among other things. But that's besides the point. What we know is that it's unfortunate that they're able to do this because there were a lot of other things on the line. And by the way, Brad Schimmel focused on crime, which I'm not saying is a bad thing to do. But in terms of rural Wisconsin, energizing voters there, crime is not a number one issue. There's next to no crime in rural Wisconsin. They have problems there. But crime is not going to be like the motivating factor for that low propensity base. Maybe in WoW you run ads about crime. He did fine there. Still not even as good as Trump. But crime is not going to motivate voters in rural Wisconsin as much as people might think. And of course, the left is going to have the dumb takes about this. Like, turns out you can't buy Wisconsin. Well, sucks to be this guy because George Soros and his goons did. The spending was even split. Sometimes you'll see the graphs and they'll have the Republicans spending a little bit more than the Democrats spending. Sometimes it's the other way around. The bottom line is we understand big money is at play in both sides in politics. It's funny because the left has had it for a while, never complain about it until it's Elon that jumps in on the Republican side. But still, it's not like his money did Brad Schimmel any good. It just energized the opposition, and that's the way it is. So either way, Republicans need to find a way to message better, and they need to turn out Donald Trump's lower propensity base much better if they want to go out there and win these off-year elections. And it could be a problem come the midterms. I think obviously you're going to have higher turnout. It's going to go a little bit back to baseline. We understand that, but still, these elections are tilting in the Democrat column. Despite the fact that nationally their party is in complete shambles, that is true. But in terms of the micro, they're doing very well on the micro, not so well on the macro. But they are taking advantage of this, and they're building up their narrative. And come 2026 even, they may not have the best night. It is true. We know how these things go. They won by 11 in 2023. 2024 was a disaster for them, and they win by 10 now. So we'll see what happens next year in the state of Wisconsin. But regardless, Republicans need to find a way to energize Donald Trump's base and get them out and voting on elections where he's not on the ballot, or they are going to struggle against this party that is a clown show, that is in shambles, because that is very much true. But the only people that the Democrats can lose to are the Republicans. So there needs to be some more changes. We've made a lot of progress, and that's true, but there's a long way to go. And last night is proof of that. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.